I bumped into a friend of mine. He's a Native American Indian, and his name is Brandon. And I'm going to introduce Brandon.
Yeah, Brandon with a D, and most people like to say American Indian as a way to be politically correct, I suppose. And there's been a dispute about that because it's not an unofficial title that was given to us. So people often co-opt that for Native American, and seeing how this land is pretty supreme as far as freedoms and having the individual right to be who you want to be. Instead of a Native American, I like to go by a Super American.
I love that. Super American. So basically American 2 times.
Absolutely, yes. We did embrace it. I mean, there's no way we could have had a concept of equal rights or whatnot, but we were here, and what happened with European colonization, like fast forwarded us like centuries beyond tribal warfare and whatnot. So
Help me understand what you mean it fast forwarded you.
the ideas of representative government, that was the whole history of Western civilization happening in Europe. Meanwhile, tribes such as Navajo or the other indigenous cultures that were in North America just existing, neither side knew about each other, and they had different ways to kind of get their civilization to progress, and mainly it was just tribes and chiefs, and everybody does the same thing for a common purpose, or does a different thing for a common purpose. And then you have European settlers coming over here, and then the history behind that. I like to make the joke that I'm the most assimilated native that you may ever meet.
Which means?
Basically that I speak very well. I don't tend to... I'm not very traditional, for sure. I have certain traditions that I adhere to, that I try to. Like, I have my hair, which is long, and certain superstitions that I try to keep in mind, such as like we're not supposed to see a snake eaten, or we're not supposed to touch snakes or reptiles. So I've learned that just of course keep your distance, because those things can kill you.
That's a good point. I did the same thing.
Yeah, there you go, right? And in terms of assimilated native, in high school, I really took... What's the term I'm looking for? I really took to the principles founded by the Founding Fathers. Individual rights, limited government, and the idea that our Creator created us all equal, and the government is meant to protect the rights of the individual instead of kind of arbitrarily deciding what's good for the people, which we're seeing a lot of right now.
And somebody that is trying to arbitrarily determine the rights of the people would be?
A tyrant, a monarch.
Who would that be?
At this point, it's not really there's not one single person you can point to, and I have heard a lot of people say that Nancy Pelosi is kind of like one of the higher ups, or like the figurehead, where because she's the position of power that she holds.
But what's your feeling? What do you feel?
I feel, well, I definitely don't agree with the narrative that the president, the Great White Hope, President Donald Trump, is a tyrant. If he were...
Wait a minute. An American Indian, here, scoot over just a little bit closer. There we go. American Indian is saying that he's the Great White Hope. Let's translate that. I think I know what that means, but let's translate that from an American Indian. You're not paid to say any of this, are you?
No.
This is your feeling. This is your heart, right? Okay, back to Great White Hope.
As far as I can get it across, yes. But the Great White Hope, that isn't my idea necessarily. It didn't originate from me. I got to give a shout out to JLP, Jesse Lee Peterson. He's a talk show host in LA, and that's the way he likes to describe the president, is he's the Great White Hope.
Because Jesse Lee is?
Conservative black radio talk show host. He supports the president. He's also I believe the way he kind of holds himself is he's a Christian that adheres to the belief that truth is the one and above all end to any means, and you ought not to lie, you know. And he has a whole great philosophy about how to rebuild society as far as the black community, because the black community right now is what's suffering, and not in the way that is being driven mainstream wise, but like the way.
Why do you think the black community is suffering?
As far as I've kind of seen it, it's a lot of bad influence. So in sociology, I learned that the basic unit to any civilization is the family. And what's happening in the family, in the black community families, is that there's no family unit anymore. It's been broken up. You have young black males being pressured or being heavily influenced to follow kind of like gang culture, whereas, you know, where instead of being a man, they kind of go around being thugs or bullies. And that is kind of a byproduct of their fathers not being in the home. And as Jesse Lee Peterson would say, is that the fathers are absent to protect them from their mothers. And the spirit of the mother is, I mean, I don't want to say evil, but it's not the way a male should be. You get, you know, you loud, emotional. A man shouldn't be that. A man should be logical and kind of more reserved. And the way that they're acting, as you can see in these riots, is they like to act out instead of thinking things through, or kind of having that moment of self-realization, like, hey, maybe it's not just who I'm pointing the finger at, which right now they're trying to blame white people for everything, which isn't the case. It runs deeper than that. Like I said, it comes back to the family unit, and they've been broken up, and you have single moms trying to raise young men, and then they substitute, conceptually they substitute the father figure for the state, and then that's where you get the criticisms of welfare moms.
Gotcha. So, kind of back to the American Indian, your culture, which again is the tribe.
Navajo. I am full-blooded Navajo, and I have the certificate to back it up.
That's awesome. And so, what's it like? How did you come to this realization of wearing this hat, being conservative, when a lot of the mainstream media says that the American Indians are picked on, they're put upon. How did you grow into this? Help us understand.
So, like I said, it kind of started back in high school. I guess it was like, and I think it's in the Declaration of Independence, where it's based on the idea that representative government should represent the people. And from middle school, somehow, I don't know why, it was just innate in my being, but I learned about pharaohs. I learned about,
from Egypt?
Yeah, pharaohs from Egypt, kings and monarchs from, European history. And just everything about that I disagreed with, just from my core. I didn't like the idea that there's this one person that gets to decide everything for everyone. And now it kind of makes sense, considering that, they kept people in a dumbed down status, kind of like how they're trying to do again now, by keeping the serfs or the peasants from reading, which I thought was that was mind-blowing to me, that it was a fundamental principle that they kept them from reading in order to keep them subservient. So,
and how does that translate to today? What are they doing today to keep people subservient?
This right here, a cell phone.
How many?
Television, laptops, electronics. I mean, there's certain little bits that we read, but if it doesn't capture our attention within the first 30 seconds, or we don't see it, it doesn't agree with our worldview, or we don't find it exciting enough, it's down the memory hole, as George Orwell would put.
George Orwell, 1984, Animal Farm. And talking about censorship, those are books that, do they still have that in public schools today, like on your reservation?
I couldn't tell you. I grew up off the reservation.
Okay.
God bless. Glory to God. I didn't happen to get raised on the reservation. I have relatives that did live on the reservation. I'd go out to see them, my grandparents. God rest their souls. But in first grade, I guess this is this going back to the reading thing. My dad was loving enough to purchase me Hooked on Phonics, if you remember that. Yeah, Hooked on Phonics. And I had two friends with me that we were the Three Musketeers, and I think it was because he was in the same room as us. He would try to help them out too with it, but because he was my dad, and I was like, I can't, disobey him while he's in the same room or mess around or whatever. I got to take this seriously, and I did. And by first grade, I think I was like the top of my class in reading.
So basically, you started out your first at 6 years old, basically homeschooled.
Not necessarily. I was still in public school.
But your dad gave extra attention, and so that's how somebody becomes successful, is the dad's in the game.
Yeah, actually.
Right? A little bit more this way. Okay, there we go.
Yeah, actually, that kind of brings us back to the whole the idea of the patriarch in the family, keeping the glue that keeps the family unit or the household secure. And then with a good role model, I mean, there are some crappy dads out there, and you kind of just got to rise above that. And as Jesse Lee Peterson would put it, you got to forgive your parents, because it's just like, yeah, you got to forgive your parents just like you got to try to forgive everybody. We don't know what we're doing. It's just in our nature to, I guess, in a faithful kind of way, it's in our nature to sin. We don't know any better until we have that moment where God touches our hearts or our minds, at least actually know our hearts, moreover, and we realize, that we need to start behaving more than acting how we want to act.
So I hear a lot of God. I also am a man of faith and trusting in God and Jesus. I hear a lot of this. What's your feeling on your heart, your faith? Who's your God?
God, Jesus Christ. I do believe and I accept that He died for our sins so that we may continue to live without the burden of the way that the Old Testament kind of carried itself. And this comes from like a lot of years of being skeptical or critical of how churches and religion were used. As a common thing you would hear is that, the reason for war is mostly religion. And in my opinion, at this point, that seems like a good way that the world has been able to convince some or most people that the idea of faith is bad. So in a way, that's kind of like a metaphysical manifestation of how Satan would convince people that they don't need religion. God didn't create man, man created God. And I kind of went with that for a while, but I wish it was just as simple as that. But again, this is something I had to experience for myself, and a lot of people, I don't know if they put in the time to kind of be as perceptive of their surroundings or the way that they're who they are goes through this world as I have. I've had certain instances where it's like, this kind of had just been by accident. And
so basically, this couldn't happen by accident. There's a creator.
Yeah, absolutely. And
I believe that too.
And there you go. And it's just like in the founding documents, as our creator created us all equal. There's no way that he would have...
Wait a minute. In our founding documents that people are wanting to destroy, say it one more time.
That we were all created equal.
By our creator.
By our creator. Endowed with certain unalienable rights. And
I got to say, this is one of the most beautiful things I've ever experienced in my life, is meeting someone that has these principles. And you said that you were a registered independent, and then you walked me through how you kind of changed over to and again, I'm not promoting a certain party or whatever, but this is very interesting what Brandon has to say, being a Native American Indian.
So growing up, I mean, I'm 31 now, and when I turned 18, my parents never really pushed either any political party on me, or they hardly even told me to go get out and vote. Well, my dad did. My dad, he's a Marine, so he understood, or he wanted to instill in me the...
Hoorah!
There you go, hoorah! I'll let him know you said that. And but at first I didn't. I registered, for selective service, and then I registered for independent because I tried to be, well, I guess what I would call it now when I see people that wear the mask but then they'll take it down, or like they say they'll have they'll have the mask in their purse or something nearby, and then they'll put it on when somebody pressures them to. But that aside, I tried to be neutral. I didn't want to be Democrat. I didn't want to be Republican for whatever reasons I was hearing. Democrats are, I don't even remember the criticism back then. Nowadays, you'll hear, Democrats are socialists, which they are. And then Republicans are the racist party, this and that. And not a lot of people know that it's actually kind of the reverse, not reverse entirely. The Democrats were the ones who started the KKK. And then the Republicans, I guess they're supposed
The Democrats are the ones that started the KKK. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
As far as I can remember, I took a American history from, I think it was about early 1700s up to, no, early 1600s up to late, just about the turn of the century of the 1800s. But basically what it said was that the KKK was a democratically found organization to instill fear in blacks to vote, or to not vote, to keep them from voting. And because
That's terrible.
yeah, absolutely. And this was about the time when Abraham Lincoln became president, and he was going forward with trying to free the slaves, and the whole issue over slavery. Do we keep it? Do we not? And yeah, the Democrat Party back then, and in ways today, they kind of keep the black people subservient to them to either keep votes or to just have a population to prey on because they can't get by on the merit of their ideas.
This is amazing information. This is stuff that you're not hearing on mainstream media at all.
No, you absolutely won't. I mean, if you know where to go, you may find it on alternative sources because right now.
So basically, what you said, you held up the cell phone, you held the computer, you talked about that and the internet. That's how they're basically trying to form a cult or brainwash people into thinking something?
No, the way they're trying to keep a cult, or they're trying to maintain a cult and build a cult following, is through the universities, because that's where this all kind of originated. This was like, let me see, so just before, maybe about 2016, just before the election. And this is kind of brings me back to the whole what made me go from independent to Republican, was that at that time it was underneath, it was the undercurrent. Universities, certain institutions were pushing the idea of political correctness, that you should watch what you say before you say it, and you should be sensitive to the words that you say in case you don't want to offend anybody. And then the biggest case in point that I can remember that I would like to point to is Milo Yiannopoulos. Milo Yiannopoulos, he's a gay conservative, but he's not a citizen of this country. But he came over into, I think it might have been UC Berkeley, a university in California, to speak. And he has some pretty, I don't want to say radical views, but he definitely speaks his mind. And that's one thing that these leftist socialist cult members, in a manner of speaking, that's what they don't like. They don't want you to speak your mind. They want control of your thought, because control of thought is control of speech. And that's, in my view, the motive or the agenda behind political correctness. And when he came to speak, Antifa came out of the woodworks, and this was before they were even mentioned in most mainstream news. They came out in large numbers to protest or shut his speech down, which is another.
This is at your college?
No. This was in California.
In California, okay.
And this is one of their tactics, is that they don't like what you're saying, or they don't want you to say what, they don't want you to speak freely. They'll shut it down. Censorship. And this was, when I was attending the college here, I started to kind of see how that idea was permeating where I was going here at the NPC, that they're kind of like left.
NPC?
Northland Pioneer College. Their professors are kind of leaning, or more left-leaning, I detected, than conservative. And in subtle ways, they try to push the agenda through. Like I said, this is nationwide through universities, and you can look at some footage from Tucker Carlson, Fox show host, how he also explains, probably this was years ago too, how it's starting in the universities and it's permeating outwards.
So a lot of my friends, they listen to CNN and other things like that, and you know I try and stay away from news altogether, and I just say you shouldn't watch the news. But you are a free thinking person. Fox News is not brainwashing you into this or some other conservative thing. Again, I don't watch the news. That's my commitment. But what's your thought on that? Are you a free thinking person? These are thoughts that you developed yourself. Somebody's not spoon feeding you these things, correct?
I like to think so. 2007, that's when I became politically awake in the way I like to see it, just as I was about to graduate. And I didn't have much direction of what I was doing. I thought I wanted to join the military because that's usually, a last resort for most people when they don't know what they want to do. And like going through back in the day, MySpace was a thing, and on weekends I didn't have much going on because I was basically a nerd and spent my time on the computer. And I was going through my MySpace friends that I've accumulated for one reason or another, and weeding them out, saying, hey, who do I talk to, who do I not talk to? And I went across this one individual's page, and he had the movie Loose Change. Have you ever heard of that?
No, I haven't.
Loose Change is basically kind of like a documentary style film where it explains the inconsistencies, we'll say, behind the 9/11 terrorist attacks. And this is kind of, I guess that was when I started going down the rabbit hole that, my God, I haven't been told the entire truth, or possibly, we're not being told the entire truth. There's something else underneath the surface that's happening. And so from that moment forth, I kind of went from there, and then somehow I ran across InfoWars and figured, I don't want to be a brainwashed person, because I know at that point I knew I could be susceptible to the same kind of, like, if I just indoctrinate myself with this is what I'm going to think. So if I want to avoid that, I need to take the information that's being presented, think about it critically, and say, does this make sense? Am I seeing this manifesting in the real world? And just kind of went from there. And yeah, basically, and now I'm at the point where I know I have to be skeptical of everything. And as far as Fox News goes, CNN, I know I don't trust CNN because, for one, Russian hoax, impeachment, president's a racist, and not to mention Hollywood, the way that they all ganged up against the now sitting president, Donald Trump, that was the biggest red flag for me. I was like, if so many people in the mainstream culture are against this one person, to me that tells me that he is not one of them, and he wasn't supposed to win. And with Fox News, the only one I watch, if at all, I haven't watched him in a while, I sometimes catch his clips on YouTube, is Tucker Carlson, because he tries to cut out the BS. He asks a question, and he doesn't try to dance around it. He tries to get succinct answers, and sometimes you'll see guests on there, and a lot of people don't want to go on his show because of how thorough he can be. But you see with a lot of people, they try to dance around the question or try to make it into a different topic of discussion, and that's what I noticed is, like, if an individual is not answering a question directly or in plain terms that most people can understand, they might be hiding something. And so now I kind of just watch the world. I watch world events as they develop. And for anybody that's been paying attention, since 2016, things have kind of gone just off the rails. And in my opinion, it's because Hillary Clinton didn't win, because that's who they needed to keep the ball rolling as far as...
With their socialist agenda?
Oh, even bigger than that, the New World Order.
Very, 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 very interesting.
Yeah, it's not for the timid of heart. It's not, it's something that you can just drink up in one effort. It takes a lot of time to kind of look over and understand piece by piece how it all connects.
How would the New World Order translate to your faith?
Revelations, the one world government system, mark of the beast, the idea that generally speaking, the government or those that are in control of the government stamp out individual rights, return back to the old ways. The New World Order, I remember hearing it put, the New World Order is the old world order, just it's spruced up in nice suits, and they got a different mannerism or ways of handling things from behind the scenes, where you get bureaucracies, you get NGOs, non-government organizations, such as the Club of Rome, the Bilderberg Club, who else? The Trilateral Commission. Nobody knows the Federal Reserve. Like, those are like catchphrases that some people can throw around and say, I don't know what that means. But if you investigate it, you see that they're unelected officials that have so much influence over everything we see and do. And they weren't elected there as the way that the founders of this country wanted it to be. They wanted open transparency, but I guess, the New World Order is the old world order. They want to return to where people are serfs, people are subservient. They want to be the power wielders and the controllers of the future.
Well, I have to say I agree with everything Brandon's saying. It's just really nice to hear from a Native American person, and super American person, and American twice, and so, the other thing that is so heartwarming to me is that Brandon is he loves America. And he loves his tradition, his family, the things that he holds dear, and it's beautiful. It's just a beautiful thing, and it's not anywhere near what people are telling me. And news media is saying, again, I don't watch the news for that reason, is because I don't believe what they're saying is true, and so I don't even watch Fox. No disrespect. So I just don't even watch Fox. I don't watch anything. I like to talk to real people, and this is amazing. And I believe exactly what you said about Revelations. I believe that is coming. I believe that Armageddon is coming sooner or later. I believe that Jesus Christ, he's going to set up a beautiful kingdom.
Amen. Yeah. And I mean, as far as I can tell, it's not really for us to truly grasp. What God has in plan for all of us, it's beyond our understanding, and we can only hope to catch a glimpse of clarity into what the grand design is.
But it's going to be beautiful, it's going to be wonderful, there's not going to be killing, there's not going to be... The lion will lay down with the lamb.
No longer, there will be no suffering, no crying, and...
No crime, too.
Yeah. Crying, crime, no suffering, I mean... Reading through that passage where it mentions that, it broke me down. I was involved in a impromptu Bible study, and I was trying to read through that, and the way it just touched my heart, I couldn't even finish it without my voice cracking. It was beautiful and kind of sad at the same time, because men need to be men and not emotional. But I think if a man is to be allowed to be emotional over something, it should be the Word of God.
That's well said. Well, Brandon, I think we've talked about a lot of things today. Anything else that... And you're a beautiful human being, and God bless you. And thank you for sharing. Thank you for coming on the show. Again, we just bumped into each other on the sidewalk here, and just started chatting, and then I said, hey, do you want to be on my show? And I didn't know all this stuff was there, but wonderful things, because you've done the studies yourself and gone into all these things, so thank you so much for sharing. Anything else that you'd like to kind of say in closing?
Just to clarify, so how radical the left has become, I saw that developing since about 2015, 2016. And the hypothesis I came up with at the time was, if these guys keep getting more, I guess, outrageous, or just to reuse the term, more radical, the more they're going to push me over towards conservatism, I didn't see it in the future, but, towards being a Republican, no longer being a fence sitter, because we can't be fence sitters any longer. Men have to stand up for what's right, what is true, stand up for our country, and not to be bullied, not to be canceled out, not to fear anyone but God, and to keep this this wonderful blessing that was established here many years ago that now suddenly radical Marxists are trying to destabilize and destroy. And I don't know, I mean, don't take my word for it. Go out and do your own research.
I like that.
Think for yourself. And one of the biggest people that one of the first individuals to be victimized by this big tech censorship was just about 2 years. Was that 2 years ago? About 2018, 2017, when the caravans started coming from South America. Alex Jones. Look into what he has to say. Make up your own mind. Don't believe what anybody tells you about him, including myself. I support the man. He's trying to do, he's trying to fulfill his purpose on this earth, as am I. I mean, I don't have many people following me or paying attention to what I say, but by his good graces, like, I was given this opportunity here to speak out, get across what points I could, and hopefully what I said here will inspire some people to, get up and act, to do things in a reasonable and just way, stand up for their country that they enjoy, or, as they say, love it or leave it. You think someplace else is better than this country? I implore you, I highly suggest you go out and try to find it. Because if I could quote Alex Jones for a second, if you're looking for the solution to the problems that you see around you, look in the mirror, and that is the solution. We all got to get up, and we all got to do what is right, or, believe in something, or you can fall for anything. And that's what they want. They want you to be complacent. They want you to be just another pawn on the chessboard. So either start acting like a king or queen, which is a better piece, actually, but...
Awesome.
On that note, I mean, if I may take a second to show my sign.
Yeah, let's do the sign. You got a small commercial break here from Brandon. Let's get the sign right in there, right in the middle. And take your time to read it. This is Brandon's own words. This is his own feelings. And God bless you. That's what I got to say. And what does it say on the back?
Another thing the mainstream media
Here,
won't tell
do
you.
that so that they can see it. Remember David Doran, real hero. Okay? What, I don't know who that is. So sorry.
No, unfortunately, you won't hear about him in mainstream media. That's another way that they block information. David Doran was a retired police officer. I believe it was in Minneapolis or Minnesota. I can't recall. I always get those two mixed up, just like March and May. But he was a retired police officer that was trying to help out his friend's business, a pawn shop, I believe. It was getting robbed during these riots, and he was shot and killed. He died on the sidewalk. He did not deserve to die.
And he was African American, wasn't he?
Yes, he was.
And so he was killed by somebody from purporting Black Lives Matters or one of the white Antifa people or something like that, correct?
I believe they have the suspects on camera from footage from inside the pawn shop, and there was about five or so males and one, I think, female. And as they were entering the shop, you could see one of them wielding a weapon. And they released this footage in hopes that they could find who it was that killed Officer Doran and bring him to justice. And not to say that George Floyd, didn't deserve what he got. That should be something that most people should be critical of. Definitely is the unwarranted or overuse of force by police officers. And both of them died unjustly, in a manner of speaking. But you only hear about one. You only hear about one above the others, and it's just a way to fuel the flames of hate and anger within the black community. And for spectators such as myself or you or anybody that doesn't identify as, African American or black, it leaves us kind of just, do we support or do we risk speaking our minds in disagreement and then have the consequences follow, which could be fear, or not fear, but this cancel culture you may hear about now, people losing their jobs for saying the wrong thing.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that's going on. One thing I do believe is just cancel, because when just that little bit of fear arose in my heart, God's always taking care of me, and you would agree with that too.
Absolutely, and that's probably the biggest point.
Bring the fear back to God because He made the whole world. What you do as a little human being don't mean jack. You can fill in the blank there to Him. Because He's God Almighty. He's going to do whatever He wants to do. And I say the same thing with me. If I'm doing something, I'm just a human being. One day I'm going to die. I'm going to be in the grave. And as I'm talking about God, I was thinking, I just got a phone call. I'm sure that's not him, but...
Well, so I'm not. Maybe he's upset about misrepresenting his views and speaking for him, too. But, I mean, one little phrase that I'd like to think I came up with, but glory goes to God for the way that I think and try to manifest those thoughts, is that it's God's earth, but we are seeing it very rapidly become Satan's world. Be in the world, be not of it.
I always thought I'm not going to get too on the show with that stuff, but I'm glad that Brandon's saying this. This is his own heart, and this is a real person. Are you a real person? I just poked him. He's real.
I'm pretty sure. Yeah, I'm as real as they come. But
anyway, I think what Brandon said was great. Is just study it out for yourself. For goodness sakes, you got to you can't just be a mind-numbed robot human and always getting the same information. That's the same thing I did at church. I decided to, I'm going to see what I really feel and determine what I feel about God and things like that. I've shared this with a lot of my friends. You've got to do the Martin Luther. When I'm saying Martin Luther, like 1400s, where he nailed all the thesis to the door and said, "This is what I believe." You got to know what you believe, because in the end, it's just you and the Maker talking. So you better know what you believe, because all of us are going to stand there. Doesn't matter who you are, doesn't matter what you believe. But there's a Maker. He made you, whether you believe it or not, whether you're evolutionists or whatever you are. That's what I believe. I'm going to stand there in front of Him, and I'm going to take account of my life. And I'm happy for my life, but I'm sure there's some things that I could have done better. And so with that, I'm going to thank Brandon and...
Thank you, Eric, for allowing me this chance. And, make a decision or it's going to be made for you.
Well said.